What would you do if your husband handed you divorce papers in the middle of a family dinner? I thought I had everything under control until that night when one careless laugh exposed everything. I'm Irene Vale, 34, and until a few months ago, I thought I had a picture-perfect life. A steady husband, a sweet daughter, and a calm house that always smelled like coffee and soap. Ethan was the kind of man people called dependable. My parents loved him, my coworkers said I was lucky, and I believed them. Maybe that was the problem. I started mistaking stability for boredom. At school, Julian joined our staff mid-year, charming everyone with his confidence. He'd lean on my doorway during breaks, joke about the endless grading, tell me how I made chaos look graceful. It was harmless, or that's what I told myself. When you've been married for years, little compliments feel like proof that you still matter. Ethan didn't say much lately. He came home tired, checked the locks, asked about dinner. I wanted attention, not safety. When my sister Nora warned me to stop talking about Julian so much, I laughed it off. It's just friendship, I said. She didn't believe me, but I convinced myself I did. The more Ethan tried to stay calm about my late meetings and weekend teacher hangouts, the more I painted him as controlling. I told friends he was jealous, too serious, too predictable. I made myself the victim in a story I was writing with my own hands. Looking back, I see how every small choice built toward that night, the dinner where everything cracked open. But at the time, I felt clever, untouchable, sure I could balance a husband's devotion and a co-worker's attention without dropping either. I was wrong. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. It was Miriam's idea to host the family dinner. She said it had been too long since everyone sat down together without rushing off somewhere. I agreed, even volunteered to bring dessert, because I wanted to look like the perfect daughter-in-law. Ethan liked those nights. Quiet, polite, predictable. I liked them too, but for different reasons. They made me feel like I was winning, like I was the one holding our marriage together with a smile and a well-timed compliment. That afternoon, I spent too long choosing a dress, something elegant but not flashy. I wanted Ethan's mother to see me as graceful, not guilty. Julian texted while I was curling my hair. Hope the dinner goes well. Don't forget to save me leftovers. I laughed and typed back, you wish. Then he sent another. Maybe I'll drop by and see for myself. I thought he was joking, so I said, you'd give my husband a heart attack. When I didn't reply again, he sent a winking emoji. I told myself it was harmless. By the time we arrived, the table was already set. Miriam loved her heavy silverware and white napkins folded like triangles. She kissed my cheek and said I looked lovely. Ethan smiled faintly, that polite smile he uses when he's already tired. You didn't have to dress up, he said. I replied, you always say that, but you never complain when people tell you your wife looks good. He chuckled quietly. It felt like a win. Dinner started smoothly enough. Miriam asked about work, Ethan talked about a project, and I made sure to nod at all the right moments. The doorbell rang halfway through the main course. Miriam looked surprised. I wasn't expecting anyone else. When she opened the door, my heart stopped for half a second. It was Julian, holding a bottle of wine and grinning like he belonged there. He ran into me outside, Miriam said cheerfully. Said he was one of your colleagues. I froze, then forced a smile. Yes, Julian. From school. I couldn't think fast enough to stop it. Ethan stood to shake his hand, polite as always. Nice of you to join us, he said. Julian laughed and said he just wanted to return the books I lent him and didn't realize we were having a family dinner. Miriam, always hospitable, insisted he stay. My pulse was pounding, but I nodded like it was no big deal. Julian sat beside me, too close. He talked easily, charming everyone with stories about teaching. When he complimented Miriam's cooking, she beamed. Ethan mostly listened, quiet but attentive. I tried to act normal, cutting my food, laughing at harmless moments. But then Julian nudged Ethan's shoulder and joked, "I see where Irene gets her patience. She must need it living with an engineer." Everyone chuckled. I should have stayed silent, but instead I laughed too loudly. Ethan didn't move, just looked at me, calm and unreadable. The air changed. Miriam stopped mid-smile. Nora, sitting across from us, gave me that sharp sisterly glance that says, "Stop now." I pretended not to notice. "Oh, he's used to my jokes," I said, touching Ethan's arm like it was all lighthearted. "Aren't you, honey?" He nodded once. No smile this time. The conversation limped on, but the warmth was gone. I kept talking, about school events, about Sophie's art project, anything to drown the silence. Julian tried another joke about grading papers late at night and how some of us teachers forget to sleep. He looked at me when he said it. I smiled but didn't respond. Even I could feel how wrong it looked. When dessert came out, Miriam's hands were trembling slightly as she set down the plates. Ethan thanked her, his voice steady but distant. I wanted to reach for him, but pride held me still. I could feel everyone's eyes flicking between us. I told myself they were imagining things. After dinner, Julian stood and said he'd better get going. He thanked Miriam again and winked at me as he left. I pretended not to see. The sound of the door closing felt heavier than it should have. Miriam cleared her throat and began stacking dishes. Nora helped quietly. The rest of us sat in silence until Ethan finally spoke. "I'll drive home alone," he said, his voice flat. I blinked. "Why? We came together." He didn't look at me. "I need air." He stood, thanked his mother, kissed our daughter on the head, and left without another word. The room went cold. Miriam looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, "That was unkind, Irene." I tried to laugh it off, saying he was just tired. Nora didn't say anything, but her eyes said everything. I started gathering plates, pretending not to care, pretending not to notice how everyone avoided looking directly at me. Driving home alone later, I replayed the scene in my head. Julian's nudge, my laugh, Ethan's face. I told myself it was nothing serious, just an awkward misunderstanding. Ethan was too sensitive, that was all. Still, when I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. His car wasn't there. For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of something I didn't want to name. The next morning, Ethan was already gone when I woke up. His side of the bed looked untouched, pillow still perfectly in place. I told myself he must have left early for work, but the truth sat heavy in my chest. No note, no text. Just absence. I made coffee, stared at my phone, considered calling him, then decided against it. Let him cool off. If I chased him, I'd look guilty, and I had nothing to feel guilty about. Or that's what I kept repeating. At school, Julian was waiting by my classroom door. "Rough night?" he asked, smiling like it was a private joke. I told him it was fine, that Ethan was just being moody. He said I shouldn't let a man make me feel bad for laughing. "You were the life of that dinner," he said. I wanted to believe it, so I did. We sat through the morning meeting side by side, whispering little comments about the principal's long speeches. Every time he brushed my arm, I told myself it was nothing. At lunch, I texted my sister. He left early. No message. "Overreacting much?" Nora replied almost instantly. "Irene? What happened last night? You looked nervous when that man showed up." I told her it wasn't a big deal, that she was reading too much into it. He's just a coworker and Ethan's acting like a child. She wrote back, "Then stop talking about the coworker if it causes problems." I stared at the screen and didn't answer. She never understood that I needed someone to talk to. Ethan never listened anymore. When I got home that afternoon, the house was spotless. Ethan always cleaned when he was angry. It was his quiet protest. There was a note on the counter that said only, Dinners in the fridge. No heart, no name, just words. I rolled my eyes, trying not to let it sting. I told myself he'd snap out of it soon. Later that night, Julian called. "Just checking in," he said. "Did your husband calm down?" I told him Ethan was still sulking. He laughed and said, "He's lucky to have you, you know." I liked hearing that. I needed to. We talked about lesson plans, weekend plans, nothing important, but his voice was warm, reassuring. When I hung up, I realized I was smiling. The next day, Nora came by unannounced, carrying groceries and judgment. "You need to stop playing with fire," she said the moment she stepped in. "Ethan's not stupid. He knows something's off." I told her she was exaggerating, that I was tired of everyone making me feel like a villain. She frowned. "Then why are you defending this Julian so much?" I crossed my arms. "Because he actually listens to me." She sighed and said quietly, "You're going to lose everything if you keep pretending you're innocent." After she left, I paced the kitchen, angry but unsure at whom. I wasn't cheating. I hadn't done anything. A few texts, a few laughs, nothing worth this drama. Still, when I heard Ethan's car pull into the driveway that evening, my stomach tightened. He came in quietly, nodded hello, washed his hands, and started dinner without a word. I tried to act casual, talking about Sophie's drawing and the weather, but he barely responded. When we finally sat down to eat, he looked up and asked, "Why did a parent mention your handsome coworker today?" His tone was even, not accusing, which somehow made it worse. I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. "What are you talking about?" He said, "Someone at church said they saw you and him at that cafe near school last week. Together." I laughed, too loud. "Oh, for God's sake. We were grading papers. That's what teachers do." He nodded slowly. "Of course." The silence after that stretched like a wall between us. I started stacking plates just to have something to do. He didn't stop me, didn't argue, didn't even sigh. When I asked if he was coming to bed, he said he'd sleep on the couch. "You don't have to," I said, but he didn't answer. Lying in bed alone, I replayed his tone, flat, measured, not angry, but sure. He wasn't guessing anymore. He knew something. I thought about deleting my messages with Julian, then decided against it. That would make me look guilty. Still, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt louder. The next morning, I told myself I'd fix it. I'd be sweet, apologetic, maybe make his favorite breakfast. But when I came downstairs, the couch was empty, blanket folded neatly, car already gone. He hadn't eaten. At work, Julian asked if things were better. I shrugged and said Ethan was distant. Julian said, "Then maybe he's the one who needs to figure out what he wants." He smiled and brushed my shoulder again, that same casual touch that made my heart race and my stomach twist. By the end of the week, I convinced myself that Ethan was the problem. He was cold, controlling, judgmental. I was just living my life. That's what I told Nora when she called to check in. "He's trying to trap me in some perfect wife act," I said. "I can't breathe like this." She went quiet for a moment, then said, "Irene, you're rewriting the story to make yourself comfortable." Her words stung, but I laughed them off. "You always think I'm the bad guy." "I don't," she said softly, "but I think you're about to become one." That night, when Ethan came home, he didn't say hello. He just sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, typing something I couldn't see. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Getting advice." "About what?" I asked. He looked up briefly. "About how to protect myself." I tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. "You make it sound like I'm dangerous." He didn't answer. Just kept typing. For the first time, I wondered if maybe he wasn't bluffing. If maybe I'd pushed him too far. But then I told myself, as I always did, that I'd find a way to make him see reason. I always did. The following Friday, I went to the teacher happy hour at the downtown bistro. I almost didn't go, but Julian texted that morning, saying everyone expected me to be there. "You're the fun one," he wrote. "Don't let your husband's mood kill your spark." That was enough to push me out the door. I spent an hour choosing an outfit. Not too flashy, but something that said I wasn't the kind of wife who stayed home sulking. The bistro was crowded, warm with laughter and clinking glasses. Julian was already there when I arrived, sitting at the end of a long table with a drink waiting for me. He smiled when he saw me, the kind of smile that makes you feel seen. I told myself it was fine. Colleagues could share drinks. I'd earned a night of fun. We were halfway through our second round when I heard my name. "Irene?" I turned and saw Nora standing at the bar. My stomach sank. She looked surprised to see me, then her expression shifted when she spotted Julian beside me. "Oh," she said quietly. I asked what she was doing there. She explained she'd come with a friend from work. I could tell she didn't believe my innocent act. "Does Ethan know you're here?" she asked. I shrugged. "He's busy," I said. She frowned but didn't argue. An hour later, I felt lighter, laughing too loudly at one of Julian's jokes when someone touched my shoulder. I turned and froze. Ethan stood there, dressed in his usual button-down, eyes calm but sharp. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said evenly. My throat tightened. "Oh, you're here," I said, forcing a smile. "Nora must have told you." "She did," he said. His gaze flicked from me to Julian, then to the half-empty glasses on the table. "Nice to finally meet the coworker I've heard so much about." Julian extended his hand like it was a business meeting. "Likewise." Ethan shook it and said nothing. The air around us felt heavy. My colleagues kept talking, pretending not to notice. I tried to joke my way out of it. "Look at this. My husband finally left his spreadsheets to socialize." A few people chuckled awkwardly. Julian smiled, thinking I'd saved it. But Ethan just watched me, expression unreadable. After a moment, he said, "I didn't realize grading papers required wine." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Julian said lightly, "It's been a long week. Teachers need stress relief, too." Ethan nodded once. "Sure." Then he reached for his wallet, signaled the waiter, and quietly paid for the whole table. "Enjoy your night," he said, and left. The laughter that followed was thin and nervous. Julian leaned closer, whispering, "He's trying to make you feel guilty. Don't let him." I forced a smile, pretending everything was fine. Inside, I was shaking. When I got home later, the lights were off. I found Ethan sitting at the dining table, papers spread out in front of him. He didn't look up when I entered. "You didn't have to embarrass me like that," I said. He replied calmly, "You embarrassed yourself." I folded my arms. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Julian's just a friend." He looked at me then, eyes cold. "Do you call your friends at midnight, or text them that you can't stop thinking about their laugh?" My heart stopped. "You went through my phone?" "I looked after you fell asleep," he said quietly. "I wanted to know why my wife laughed harder for another man than she has for me in months." I tried to sound angry instead of scared. "That's private. You had no right." He nodded. "You're right. But now I know the truth, so I don't need rights. I have facts." He gathered the papers, put them in a folder, and stood. "I'll be staying at my mother's for a while." I followed him to the door. "You're really leaving? Over texts?" He didn't turn around. "Over everything." Then he was gone. The next few days were a blur. I told Nora he'd overreacted, that he was being controlling. She said, "He's being careful." That word haunted me. Careful meant planning. By Tuesday, Ethan still hadn't come home. His phone went straight to voicemail. Miriam didn't answer my calls. Julian told me I should come out again, distract myself. I wanted to believe that was good advice. So Wednesday evening, I went back to the bistro, met him for dinner. I laughed, pretended nothing was wrong. but halfway through I saw a man across the room taking photos on his phone. He wasn't subtle. He pointed it right at us. I whispered to Julian, "Do you know him?" He shook his head. The man finished his drink, stood up, and walked out. My stomach twisted. Later that night, I saw Ethan had posted a message on his social media. Sometimes the truth documents itself. I felt cold all over. I tried calling him again. No answer. The next morning, an envelope waited on my porch, formal, heavy paper, my name typed neatly. Inside was a notice, preliminary disclosure of marital assets and intent to file separation on grounds of infidelity. My hands trembled. I told myself it was just a bluff, a scare tactic. At work, Julian noticed my silence. "He's just trying to intimidate you," he said. "He won't go through with it." But when I looked at Ethan's signature on the bottom of that page, bold and clear, I knew he already had. And somehow, what terrified me most wasn't the paperwork. It was the quiet way he'd done it, as if the man I thought I could control had finally decided to stop playing my game. Miriam called on Sunday evening and said Ethan wanted to talk as a family. Her voice was polite but distant, the kind of tone she used when she'd already picked a side. I told her, of course, I'd come. I even baked a pie, as if sweetness could fix suspicion. On the drive over, I rehearsed lines in my head, calm, measured, understanding. I'd make Ethan see how ridiculous this had all become, how gossip and jealousy had turned nothing into something. When I arrived, the house felt different, too quiet. Ethan's car was in the driveway, but I didn't see him through the windows. Inside, Miriam greeted me without her usual warmth. Nora was there too, sitting stiffly on the couch, and Sophie, my sweet little girl, was coloring at the coffee table, humming to herself like she didn't feel the tension crackling in the air. Ethan came out of the study holding a folder. He looked composed, not angry, which somehow scared me more. "Thanks for coming," he said. His tone was almost formal. I tried to smile. "Of course. We all need to clear the air." He nodded once. "That's exactly what we're doing." He sat down opposite me and placed the folder on the table. "Irene, I want to be sure everyone hears the same story, so there are no more misunderstandings." I crossed my arms. "Misunderstandings? You're the one turning rumors into accusations." He opened the folder. Inside were printed pages, text messages, screenshots, timestamps. The sight of them made my stomach twist. "These," he said quietly, "are from your school phone, the one we share the bill for." I laughed, but it came out sharp. "You went through my phone records? That's a huge invasion of privacy." Ethan didn't flinch. "I didn't need to. Everything's stored in the cloud. I just downloaded what was already ours." He slid a few pages toward me. "You can read them if you'd like, but I already did." I looked down. Lines of text leapt off the page. "You made dinner worth it. Wish I could stay longer. You always make me forget I'm married to my job." My own replies, playful, careless, were right there beneath his. I pushed the papers away. "They're out of context. You're twisting something innocent into—" Miriam interrupted softly. "Irene, please, that's not just innocent." Her voice broke something in me. I turned to Ethan. "You've been distant for months. You ignore me. You come home late, and now you act like this is my fault?" Ethan looked at me calmly. "I'm not ignoring you now. I'm listening." Nora spoke quietly. "He's giving you a chance to be honest, Irene." I wanted to scream. Instead, I laughed again, shaking my head. "You all want a confession? Fine. Yes, I enjoyed his attention. He's funny, he listens, he makes me feel seen. But I didn't sleep with him. If that's what you're fishing for, you won't find it." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "It's not about what you did physically. It's about what you decided emotionally. That my loyalty meant less than your entertainment." I opened my mouth to argue, but Miriam cut in, her eyes cold now. Do you think we're blind, Irene? Do you think we can't see what this has done to him? To Sophie? At the mention of our daughter, I turned toward her. She was standing now, clutching her crayons, watching us with wide eyes. Go upstairs, sweetheart, I said quickly. She hesitated, then obeyed. Her small footsteps disappeared down the hall. When she was gone, Ethan stood. I've filed for legal separation. The paperwork has already been processed. My throat went dry. You filed without even talking to me? He nodded. Talking hasn't worked for a long time. He placed another envelope on the table. These are temporary custody and financial arrangements. You'll have joint time with Sophie until things are finalized. I felt the air leave my lungs. You're destroying this family over gossip. No, he said quietly. You destroyed it when you stopped caring how your actions looked. Nora looked down, unable to meet my eyes. Miriam sat rigid, hands folded in her lap. The silence was unbearable. I reached across the table, grabbing Ethan's arm. We can fix this. I can fix this. I'll end whatever this is with Julian. I'll prove to you nothing happened. He pulled his arm away. I don't need proof. I already have enough. My voice rose. You're humiliating me in front of your family. He looked at me then. Not angry, not bitter, just done. You did that yourself, Irene. I'm only cleaning up the mess. I felt my eyes sting, but I refused to cry. I stood, gathering what was left of my dignity. If you think you're scaring me, you're wrong. I'll talk to a lawyer too. Ethan nodded. Good. You'll need one. I left without saying goodbye to anyone. As I stepped outside, the night air felt sharp against my skin. My hands were shaking. The folder with my own words burned in my mind. In the car, I sat for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, telling myself I was the victim here, that he was cruel, calculated, cold. But somewhere deep down, a quieter thought whispered back. He was just following the evidence I handed him myself. I didn't believe he'd actually go through with it. Men make threats all the time when they're angry, and Ethan was never the kind to follow through on anything harsh. So, for the first few days after that meeting at his mother's, I waited for him to calm down. He'd realize what a mess this separation would cause. Money, house, Sophie, and he'd come home. That's what I told myself every morning while checking my phone for a message that never came. By Thursday, a letter arrived from his lawyer. It wasn't a bluff. It was real, stamped, signed, terrifying in its quiet finality. The words protective separation and temporary custody made my hands shake. I called him immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again, then texted, "Can we please talk like adults?" No answer. At school, I was distracted, barely paying attention to my students. Julian noticed, of course. He asked what happened, and I told him Ethan was being dramatic, trying to teach me a lesson. Julian smirked and said, "You can't let him control you with fear." It sounded empowering at first until he added, "If you ever need a place to stay, you know where I am." That's when I realized how far everything had slipped. I wasn't some tragic heroine anymore. I was a cliché. That night, I went to Miriam's house to see Sophie. She opened the door but didn't step aside right away. "Ethan said you could visit on Sundays," she said. Her voice was polite but sharp, like she was reading from a script. I reminded her I was Sophie's mother, not some visitor. She sighed and said, "Then stop behaving like a guest in your own life." I brushed past her, but her words followed me down the hall. Sophie was in her room, building a tower of blocks. She looked up when I entered. "Daddy says you're sad," she said. I forced a smile. "Daddy worries too much. Mommy's fine." She nodded slowly, like she didn't believe me. When Ethan came home later, I tried to talk to him. "We can fix this if you just stop listening to everyone else," I said. He stayed by the doorway, calm as ever. "I'm not listening to anyone else. I'm listening to facts and lawyers." I rolled my eyes. So you've turned our marriage into a spreadsheet. He didn't smile. At least spreadsheets tell the truth. Then he asked me to leave. By the weekend, the gossip had spread. 2 coworkers asked if I was okay, their sympathy clearly mixed with curiosity. Someone must have told them about Ethan's legal filing. Probably one of the parents who'd seen us at the bistro. I tried to act unbothered, even told Julian it was laughable. But when I saw a mother whispering to another during pickup, I wanted to vanish. I called Nora that night, crying. "He's ruining my reputation," I said. She was quiet for a long time before asking, "Are you sure it's him doing that?" Her calm tone infuriated me. I hung up without answering. The next morning, a notification popped up on my phone, an email from Ethan's lawyer detailing financial adjustments. He'd frozen our joint account, moved his salary to a new one, and taken control of the mortgage. I felt sick. I called him again. "You can't just cut me off," I said when he finally picked up. His voice was level. "You still have your job. You'll be fine." "That's not the point," I snapped. "You're punishing me." He paused. "I'm protecting myself and our daughter. You should do the same." The line went dead. The next week, I went to the school board office to request a few personal days. I told them I had family matters. The secretary looked at me with that soft pity people use when they know you're falling apart. I hated it. Desperate to regain control, I tried another angle. I called Miriam, pretending to be calm. "I just want what's best for Sophie," I said. "All this legal nonsense isn't healthy for her." Miriam replied, "Then stop giving her reasons to think you're the victim. She needs stability, not scenes." I hung up before she could say more. That night, I wrote Ethan an email. Long, emotional, full of the right phrases. "I miss our family. I made mistakes. We can rebuild." I waited for his reply. Instead, I got an automated message saying his email address was restricted from mine, pending legal counsel. He had blocked me. I drove to his office the next morning, heart pounding. I told the receptionist I needed to see him urgently. She made a quick call, then said politely, "Mr. Vale isn't available for personal matters during work hours." I pushed past her anyway, but 2 security guards appeared almost instantly. "Ma'am, you'll need to leave." I laughed in disbelief. "You can't be serious." One of them said, "He asked us not to let you cause a scene." Those words stung worse than any insult. I left the building shaking, humiliated, furious. That evening, I found a new envelope taped to my front door. It was from the court. Temporary custody granted to Ethan. Exclusive residence rights approved. My name was typed neatly, like it belonged to a stranger. I read it 3 times, trying to make it make sense. He had actually done it. Without shouting, without threats, without even looking back, he'd taken everything that used to orbit around me and pulled it into his own quiet order. I sat on the steps until the streetlights flickered on, the paper trembling in my hands. For the first time, I realized I wasn't fighting a jealous husband anymore. I was fighting a man who had stopped loving me, and who knew exactly how to make the law stand on his side. The day we were meant to finalize the property exchange, the sky was dull and gray. It felt like the whole world had agreed to keep quiet for Ethan's sake. I drove to the house we used to share, rehearsing what I'd say. Something calm, reasonable, adult. Maybe if I stayed composed, he'd see sense. He couldn't stay cold forever. No one could. He'd loved me once. He'd remember that. When I arrived, the house looked smaller somehow, stripped of warmth. The garden was trimmed, blinds drawn, everything too neat. Ethan's car was already in the driveway. I sat there for a minute, watching the front door, trying to slow my breathing. When I finally went inside, I almost didn't recognize it. My photos were gone from the hallway. Even the welcome mat had been replaced. Ethan was in the kitchen, not alone. A woman stood beside him, tall, serious, holding a clipboard. "This is Ms. Campbell," he said. "She's here as a witness for the property handover." His tone was professional, distant, like I was a stranger buying a used car. I forced a smile. You really needed a witness for this? He didn't answer. He pointed to the documents on the counter. These are copies of the final settlement. Once you sign, we're done. I looked at the papers but didn't touch them. You don't have to do it like this. We can talk, Ethan. Just the two of us. No lawyers, no witnesses. He shook his head. We've done enough talking. I took a slow breath. I know I hurt you, but this isn't you. You're not the type to throw away a marriage over a few bad choices. He looked at me then, really looked, and said quietly, I'm not throwing anything away. I'm reclaiming what's mine. I tried to keep my voice steady. You're being dramatic. You're angry now, but you'll regret making it permanent. He sighed. I'm not angry. Haven't been for a while. That calmness terrified me more than rage ever could. I leaned against the counter, pretending to study the documents while trying to find the right words to pull him back. We can fix this, Ethan. I'll stop seeing Julian. I'll transfer schools if that's what it takes. I'll do whatever you want. He shook his head slowly. It's not about Julian anymore. It's about the version of you I can't unsee. My chest tightened. You're judging me for one mistake. It wasn't one, he said. It was every choice you made after. Every time you laughed it off, twisted things, made me doubt myself. You turned cruelty into confidence and called it honesty. The woman beside him cleared her throat softly. I wanted to scream at her to leave. Instead, I turned back to Ethan. So this is it? You just erase me from everything? He didn't hesitate. You erased yourself. I'm just finalizing the paperwork. My voice cracked. You can't just walk away from 17 years of love. He glanced toward the window, then back at me. It stopped being love when it became humiliation. The words hit harder than I expected. I tried to keep my composure, straightened my back, forced a small laugh. You think you'll be happier alone? You'll regret this when the silence gets too loud. He said quietly, I'd rather live with silence than with someone who laughs while I'm being disrespected. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he picked up a set of keys, placed them on the counter beside the documents, and said, This is yours now. The house, the car, the rest we've divided. Everything's accounted for. I stared at the keys, the small clink of metal echoing like a closing door. You're really done, I whispered. He nodded. I was done the night you laughed at me in front of everyone. My throat burned. That was a joke, Ethan. A stupid, harmless joke. He looked at me, eyes calm, voice almost gentle. That laugh told me everything I needed to know. You weren't laughing at the joke. You were laughing at me. Ms. Campbell stepped forward, pointing to where I needed to sign. My hand trembled as I wrote my name, the pen scraping too loudly on the paper. She collected the forms, nodded to Ethan, and left quietly. The house felt unbearably still. I stood there, waiting for him to say something, anything, to break it. But he only picked up his briefcase, turned toward the door, and said, Take care of yourself, Irene. I followed him to the entryway, desperate for one last word. So that's it? After everything? He didn't look back. After everything. He stepped outside, the door closing softly behind him. I stayed there, frozen, staring at the spot where he'd stood. The silence he left behind was worse than any shouting could have been. I looked down at the keys, lying cold and still on the counter, beside the papers that carried both our signatures. They felt heavier than they should. For a moment, I thought about running after him, but what would I even say? Instead, I picked up the keys, set them back down, and whispered to the empty room, You'll come back. But even as I said it, I knew he wouldn't. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.